Thank you, sir. As you can see on the PowerPoint that I have changed the title of the talk. However, it relates, the essence has not changed because the sovereignty question is going to decide whether India and China is going to influence to a great deal whether India and China would be coming together or would be going further apart, especially in cyberspace. But before actually I get into the subject matter, I'm going to clarify something which is very basic. When we say cyberspace, we are not talking about the internet alone. Cyberspace itself consists of 4 basic layers. I'm a computer scientist, but I promise you I have tried to keep it jargon free. So basically, in cyberspace, when we talk about cyberspace, we are talking about 4 layers. The physical infrastructure layer, where you are talking about physical cables, copper cables. Then you are talking about logical layer, where you are talking about these protocols on using which the data is communicated. The rules of those protocols are decided by standardization bodies. Then you are talking about applications, like applications you use Skype, you use basically various kind of applications. Then there is the people's layer, so use various social networking. And surveillance and privacy, those kind of issues manifest themselves in the people's layer. And also, wherever society is involved comes the issue of governance. So at that layer, we also concern ourselves with the governance. So if we are talking about sovereignty in cyberspace, we have to focus on all these 4 layers, all the layers. Otherwise, we will be talking about the elephant's trunk, or the legs, or the eyes, or the ears. So this sovereignty question has been understood and debated from the IR's perspective. Cyberspace is a new beast. What do I mean by that? So here I would like to quote John Perry Barlow. Governments of the industrial world, you very giants of flesh and steel, I come from cyberspace. The new home of mine, you have no sovereignty where we gather. Cyberspace does not lie within your border. Central idea, cyberspace does not have boundaries. Please keep this thought in mind when I go with the content further on. Do not think that you can build it as though it were a public construction project. Internet itself has been a public project. It was not devised with security or control in mind. It was wholly an academic project. You cannot, it is an act of nature as it grows itself through our collective actions. It is an organic entity. How can you control it when you are not building it? Cyberspace consists of transaction, relationships, and thought itself arrayed like standing wave in the web of our communication. Your legal concepts of property, expression, identity, movement, and context do not apply to us. Now this is where the sovereignty question comes into picture, because that's what precisely governments are trying to do. They are trying to control, they are trying to devise mechanisms, and they are trying to embed those mechanisms in the legal framework. They are all based on matter. There is no matter here. It's all bits. Can you control bits? You can control borders, physical borders. Can you control bits? This is one of the interesting questions. One must declare our virtual selves immune to your sovereignty. John Perry Barlow, American activist and information activist. So I will not repeat. Basically, I have already said where the conundrum comes from. The conundrum is, if electromagnetic spectrum, if the waves can be governed using the notions of sovereignty from kinetic space, how does it become a question in the context of India and China? So very recently, in July 2014, while addressing the Brazilian Congress, Chinese President said, there are no double standards in the information sector, and every country has the right to preserve its own information security. Although the internet is highly globalized, the sovereignty of the information sector of every country should not be violated. China has put its foot down. We are not going to compromise on this. And you should ask me, why suddenly this has become a discussion? So, going back to 2005, America and mostly NATO countries have first movers advantage. if you have devised a technology, especially that happens in technology spectrum, if you have been the inventor, you would be regulating the standards and you would have the first mover advantage. So in 2005, American Air Force declared cyberspace as a conventional domain in addition to land, air, sea. So they said that cyberspace is also a domain and we are going to use the rules of engagement the way it is applied in warfare, conventional warfare. This is precisely going to happen in cyberspace. So all the nations, other nation states, they become nervous. So China and India in particular, they have started putting their foot down. So this is the argument from China. And Indian government cybersecurity strategy, which has come out in the recent years, does not explicitly talk about India's cyber sovereignty. However, Indian government likes to keep things informal. We do more actions rather than words. What did they do? Few years back, Indian government ordered Google, you have, your data servers are residing outside, but you, if anything which relates to, like, we have to track the information on the terrorists and the data is residing on servers which are basically located either outside India or inside India, you as a multinational company still have the obligation to provide us with that data. They did the same with the BlackBerry. Some of you must be aware with that. Indian government has gone on to emphasize we are thinking about sovereignty in cyberspace. China, India, both are nervous because America has made both the nations nervous. And this is where China and India are coming together. So I would talk about 4 points. Two points related with where we are going to cooperate, where we are already cooperating, and where we are going to conflict. So just like, just to emphasize the same point, 5 years later, 5 years before, another retired PLA journal said, the notions of cyber territory and cyber sovereignty refer to the need for international treaties on cyber warfare. I have put this quote for a reason. When we, in the beginning of the discussion, I said, when we talk about sovereignty, we need to think about this question from across 4 layers of cyberspace. What is being done right now? Because the cyberspace, next wars are going to be fought in cyberspace. Therefore, any question related with control of cyberspace is being hijacked by the .mil domain, the military people. Line of control concept is being applied to cyberspace. And that is very confusing. I have studied 39 nation states and everyone is talking about sovereignty, everyone is talking about different things. In some cases, there is no definition. What do you mean by that? So that's the conundrum. So far in the IR domain, they are taking actor-centric views, which is nation-state view. My argument is, my contribution is, I am saying, I am sorry. When you talk about cyberspace, you cannot divorce cyber from space. When you are trying to control something, you have to think, excuse me, here are technological nodes, here are machines. Can you actually control machines? Can you regulate the behavior of internet service providers? Can you actually stop people from breaking into or tapping into your cyber physical infrastructure? The wires I was talking about, the undersea cable through which data is communicated undersea. We have to talk about those components of cyberspace. Only then we can talk about sovereignty. However, in terms of methodology, Daniel said to me, you must ensure that your methodology is clear. So I thought if we basically are trying to address this question, we first have to look at how people are thinking about it in IR. So in IR, basically from IR perspective, I have taken the notions of sovereignty. I have used 3 models. The hypothesis in my part is I will take the concepts from IR theories and try to see if as a computer scientist, the way I understand cyberspace on those nodes, whether these concepts can map partially or in absolute manner. So the three models I have taken from IR, one is Stephen Krasner's taxonomy. He talks about sovereignty, state level sovereignty, international legal interdependency, and domestic sovereignty. So I have tried to actually extract the concepts, the defining attributes, the elaboration of concept and counter examples. Don't worry about it right now because I would distribute the paper. But the two main things Krasner focuses on is Westphalian sovereignty and international legal sovereignty. So by Westphalian, I mean the defining attribute is autonomy to define domestic authority is structure, and international legal sovereignty is mutual recognition of interdependent territorial entity. How does this become important in the context of cyber? Autonomy to define domestic authority structure. How can you define autonomy when you don't even know where the attack is coming from? Cyberspace is very asymmetric. One single Scottish hacker has shaken the whole system of Pentagon. In cyberspace, this asymmetry of power and lack of boundaries becomes very crucial when you try to apply the concept notion of Westphalian sovereignty. How can you have autonomy? How can you basically make rules when you don't know who to deal with? And even in cyberspace, another thing is that international rules of engagements are still being defined. Right now, it's a huge cacophony. Different governments are trying to actually make rules, autonomous rules, which are being contradicted by international court of law. So, so the second model I have basically referred to as from IR was John Anus's view. So he says that, and in cyberspace his model actually applies better because he says that in IR the variable nature of political authority in the era of increased but uneven flow of capital, information and people, and you see that in cyberspace that is the case. So John's view basically is more akin to how it can be applied into cyberspace. So he talks about migration of authority is the key concept which leads to 4 different types of sovereignty. And this migration of authority is the key thing in cyberspace because in cyberspace it is very difficult to devise who has the control because of the asymmetry. I will, we don't have time, so I have to skip this. And then the third one, Tallinn Manual, which is basically, it identifies the international law applicable to cyber warfare, and this is the one which most of the signatory nation states are supposed to follow when it comes to design their own autonomous sovereignty rules in cyberspace. So this basically says that sovereignty is bounded to assets within the territory. States can exercise independent control over function of its assets, and jurisdiction is subjected to international laws and treaties. This third thing itself is basically opposing the way the perception of sovereignty, especially autonomy, is held in the IR space. Migration of authority, limitations on sovereignty, its violation exception, and state-centric sovereignty. So Tallinn Manual is basically the first comprehensive document. If any of you is interested in cyber sovereignty, then this is the one you should begin with. Then component-centric view, I have already narrated briefly, so I take a system sciences approach. I say when you talk about sovereignty in cyberspace, you need to talk about data sovereignty, how you can control flow of data. Networking, how can you control the behavior of the internet service provider? Can you do it or not? Encoding, whether you can actually have your own standards for information exchange or not. So just to basically show how concepts map from kinetic to cyber. In kinetic you have boundaries. In cyber you have firewalls. In kinetic you have control posts. In cyber you have communication hubs. In kinetic you have norms. In cyber you have communication protocols. In kinetic you have authority figures. In cyber you have DNS controllers, and so on. Violation detection, limitations on sovereignty, and international jurisdiction. So coming back to how China and India are coming together on internet governance and privacy. 2 points. Internet governance, China and India both are on BRICS platform. They are both opposing the view of the US. They are saying that the authority making mechanism should be made more autonomous, and there should be more state sovereignty. Country governments should be basically making the rules according to their domestic circumstances. US is saying, sorry, that would lead to balkanization of the cyberspace. We don't want that because, and they have locked horns on this. China and India are actually cooperating on that, and this will continue because both nations are actually, Indian government talks more about democracy, but behind the screens, from what I know from my research, they are moving more towards surveillance. Privacy is diminishing, surveillance is increasing. And that's where China and India conceptually hold the same view. It's about controlling your cyber perimeter. It's about controlling the behavior of the citizens. Where they are basically locking horns, where the conflicts are in intellectual property management and supply chain manipulation. So China has conventionally been seen as the villain by most of the nation states, that they are actually stealing the intellectual property by hacking onto cyber espionage, by hacking onto companies' databases for stealing valuable information. China, to be fair on China has said, sorry, we are not the only one in cyberspace who are basically basically this claim that we are stealing the intellectual property. Israel is doing it, America is doing it, everybody is doing it on everybody else. So intellectual property management, however, in the recent times in cyberspace, one other thing is attribution is very difficult. Who has hacked onto your networks is very difficult. So these claims are always alleged. It's hard to prove it, basically. In some cases it has been proven, but it has been contested massively. Indian government on many occasions have registered its protests that China has been behind hacking, especially our information ministry websites and our military establishment websites and company websites. Supply chain management manipulation is happening. The way China is doing it is China has been very proactive in actually introducing its own standards. When suppose this is a machine and you have standards to encode the information, and that China has been introducing its own standards to devise the hardware and software. And because China is the provider of these goods and products to the rest of the world, it becomes mandatory that rest of the nations end up using Chinese standards. And then it becomes easy for China to control the flow of information or control the devices. So I have to be quick. So standards are being used, new kind of territories. Standards are basically being used as a vehicle for having more sovereignty and expanding your circle of influence. And I have basically on intellectual property right, China's technology standardization law does not talk about intellectual property protection when they share technology with other firms, multinational firms. So that is the bone of contention, especially with India and China. China has been pushing forward own encryption standards since 2009. This again is becoming the bone of contention between India and China. This slide basically tells you how China has developed various standards in various area of technology. They are embedding their own standards against international standards, which are being adopted by India. So this becomes, I'm just trying to emphasize that these are the areas where we are locking horns. And these two slides basically essentially tells you about that the Chinese state basically favors that the technology companies within China, it basically protects them. It says, okay, fine, you are legally protected by us if you develop your own standards and push it forward in the international arena. So I would just basically come to the conclusion that there are 4 areas where India and China can conflict or cooperate. To recap, the cooperation areas are internet governance and privacy versus surveillance, and the areas of conflict are intellectual property management, that is being manipulated through cyber espionage and manipulation of the standards, and then supply chain manipulation. So with that, and finally I would say that if anyone, China or India, were to worry about cyber sovereignty, we need to take into account IR notions, but you cannot ignore cyber, and these are the nodes where we need to think about how these areas can be controlled or accessed or have a mutual discussion on. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Adya Shukla. It was very fascinating. Kautilya wouldn't have been surprised because in his intelligence studies, so would have been Sun Tzu. This is the methods which states, it's news there, the manual gives it. So because of shortage of time, only 2 questions are requested, very short questions and technical types. So yeah.
I'm not sure I could fulfill that requirement of technical type, and I would not ask a computer scientist technical questions because I'm not one. But my concerns were, one is that you spoke about the fact that India and China are now moving in the direction of surveillance, and that is related to their concern with regard to sovereignty. So if we were to accept that, we would have to also accept the implicit that they're doing something different from what the other countries are doing. They're not, right? Every country is moving in that direction. I mean, if you look at the Snowden case, and it's just blown the lid off what's going on everywhere. Right? And I must say, your paper really bridges the security aspect, the sociological aspect, and the technical aspect in a way that it's really required. You're right, people do tend to differentiate these layers. So my question was, why could you include encryption as only one of the things that you think the contest is over, when actually encryption is the one standard over which all of these are coming together, not in a way that it happens in the other standards, and it affects security, it affects the way we exchange any kind of data. It's also a contest of a commercial interest, and it's definitely a contest of a norm setting in cyberspace. And as we know that encryption has been one of the few technologies from within the US domain that's still on a restricted list. And the Chinese have tried for at least more than 5 years now to try and push their own encryption standards for commercial as well as norm setting purposes. So I was just wondering, do you think it would be profitable if you just took encryption out, or rather gave it more importance than you've given it in your work?
We have one more question and then you can answer. One more question. Yeah. Madam, last question. Last, you have
very
the last.
quickly, very quickly.
Your floor is open to you.
Okay, okay. Just related to the earlier session, where earlier paper, we are talking about territory, war, and all those things, and your paper actually redefining this entire concept of territory, boundary, sovereignty. So I was just asking, that how do you understand this role of power and the nation state? That's it.
Please answer the question.
So coming to your question first, everyone is doing it. I completely agree with you. Everyone is doing it. They are doing it out of nervousness, but right now rules of engagement, the cyber norms are being defined right now. And it's only when people step on each other's toes, then they formulate clusters with each other. Like BRICS nations are happening. BRICS nations are basically putting pressure on NATO cluster. The reality has to be somewhere in between. Right now, everyone is doing it, but in the future, I'm sorry. From my understanding, we cannot function like this. We have to work towards developing a middle way, and that's where China and India are actually coming together. Because of the scalability issues in China and India both, the population, the cultural context, the sociological issues, we are closer. And that's where my hope is, that if these two titans in Asia can come together, right now, we are doing our own things as everyone else is doing. But we will come together. So I don't have any contention with you on that. Yes, everyone is doing it. I'm not blaming China or India alone that we are trying to do something different. No. The second thing was that encryption. So technically speaking, there can be an encryption protocol which is universal, which is open, but at the technology layer, you can customize it. You can tweak that encryption to suit your own devices, and every country does that because they want to have some level of control to have some sense of control on their cyber infrastructure. So there can be a higher level protocol which is basically developed by open source development groups, but every country tries to customize it, and both China and India have been doing it. Sorry, I mean I have just limited time. I'm looking at all the layers, not just encryption, but maybe you would see more of that in paper. So, so your question was
Power, redefining power in the nation state.
the power of the nation state, how it is going to propagate in cyberspace.
Yeah, maybe.
But that is
how cyberspace redefined.
how it is going to be redefined. I would say that I would refer back to the first mover advantage. For few more years, this is the reality that America is still going to dominate the internet governance layer, and that's one layer where the nation state power is basically propagating right now. I will give you an example. America has actually said that, oh, we are going to relinquish our control on internet domain name. ICANN has come out with, we are going to relinquish our control. We are going to make it more democratic. And ICANN is the body which actually controls how the internet root servers are named. They control it, and that is basically controlled by an American body, Department of Commerce. Rest of the nation states said sorry. That way you are basically making it subservient to your policies. We want something different. America said, okay, fine, we are very democratic. We basically do what we preach. We are talking about democracy and more openness in the internet. We are going to relinquish control. In reality, that is not happening. It is a PR exercise, but China and India are coming together as other BRICS nations. They are saying we don't want window dressing. We want you to make it more, hand over the basically control to UN body. We should have a more neutral UN body which controls. Divorce this control from your state-centric body to hand it over to a more multiple stakeholder organization. First 5 years, there would be punch-ups. After 5 years, my hope is not in nation states. I'm sorry, I might be biased. I'm a technologist, and what happens? Technology has its own sweet ways. Somewhere, some geeky person sitting in one lab devises a protocol. Gradually, from backdoor, over a period of time, that technology phases out old ones, and that becomes the standard. Then nation states, no matter how power hungry they are, no matter how concerned they are with having their own circle of influence, you cannot control technology. And that's where my hope is. After 5 years, we will say we will have a more balanced cyberspace in terms of power. The power will migrate from nation states to a more basically democratic space.
Yeah, now I open the floor.
There's a young man here who's done work on that.
Okay, yeah,
He
please,
has a
yes.
question to ask.
Yeah, my name is Kaushal. Actually, I have worked on a similar topic, and I must say that it was a pleasure listening to your presentation.
Thank you,
So,
Kaushal.
yeah, I have two issues. First is related to warfare, as you pointed out that the next warfare will be fought in cyberspace. Regarding that, I think there is a scholar who has written a book. Name is Thomas Reed, and the title of the book itself is the next. There will be no war in cyberspace. I don't know, have you looked into it or not? But his argument is that warfare, looking into the concept, the modern warfare, the concept itself is a Western concept. The component which are required for the modern warfare is violence is one of them. And how do you achieve violence through cyberspace. That's still not very clear. So he says his argument is that warfare in cyberspace will not happen. This is one. So what is your take on that first? And the second is regarding the the Talween manual you talked about, right? Yeah. So that is of course a nice handy work that has been done by a group of experts. You talked about that for the sovereignty issue, they'll be referring to the issue will be guided by the international law or the International Cyber Convention. But I don't think it's available as of now. No international laws are available for the cyberspace as of now, and not even cyber convention or any cyber regime has not yet been signed or had been done between any of the nation states. So what is your take on these two things? Thank you.
First one, with respect to Dr. Thomas Reid, who is at the Imperial King's College, Department of Varsity, he is a colleague. And I have personally spoken with him on these issues. Cyber warfare is already happening. So I beg to differ from Dr. Reid on this issue. He uses violence as one of the points. If I basically steal your right of by other methods, steal your right of a nation to prosper through cyber espionage, that is a form of declaring war. So that is a kind of violence. Again, we are going into semantics. How do you basically establish what is the semantics of violence? Violence can be of many kinds. Violence can be killing you, like Georgia and Russia and Estonia happened. Okay, that is quoted as one of the cyber warfare instances. But violence itself can be of many kinds, and this is another area I'm looking at, the conceptualization in cyberspace. That was my Harvard research. I will send you the paper. That how these notions of attack, warfare, well-being are being understood or defined by nation states. That's one. So I differ from Dr. Reid. I don't agree with him on that. And so many of my other senior colleagues encourage me to believe in that. I work with Department of Defense, so I am actually seeing how .mil and intelligence agencies are already, not just from America, not just from UK, not just from India, not just from China, everyone is already doing it. Second one, Tallinn Manual and the International Convention, that actually relates to cyber crime, right? The Council of Europe one you are mentioning, right?
Even there is
No. So basically, for Tallinn Manual, for the first time, have defined from the legal point of view what should be the concept of sovereignty in cyberspace. And Tallinn and European Convention of Crime is basically is the first international sensible document which addresses just a singular layer of what nation states should do in order to make rules, autonomous rules about cyber crime itself. It doesn't actually talk about surveillance, privacy, governance, sort of other things. And why did they think about making a law about cyber crime? Because cyber crime is one kind of cyber attack which actually affects, it's a transnational thing, across boundaries. Governments have to come together. So nowadays, in cyberspace context, governments are coming together to make norms, to agree with each other where their bread and butter is. Because everyone is there is no way they cannot collaborate. Cyberspace is still a baby which is trying to grow up. It's like a little girl who tries to apply lipstick and wear heels, to become the mama. There's so much discussion going on. We are still in nascent stage, and that's where the value of the student of cyberspace like you and me comes in. I would love to engage with your research. We are trying to bridge this gap. I am trying to bridge this gap from technology perspective. You are from IR perspective. We should talk to begin with. Thank you.